Have you ever finished a book and realized you remember absolutely nothing? I think it's all about the pressure and some sort of sense of duty. And I will tell you how to eliminate it by romanticizing your process and something I call the philosophical reading. But first, let's specify what exactly are we encountering. You read the words, maybe even got to the final page, a novel or something more complex like a philosophy book. But when you try to recall what it was actually about, your mind just goes blank. Or maybe you're reading and you technically understand every sentence, but somehow none of it sticks. The words, don't really connect in your head. And why does this keep happening, even with the books we want to love? When I was a kid, I read a lot. Maybe you can relate to it too. Books like Harry Potter, Chronicles of Narnia, Anne of Green Gables, and even the school required reading. I actually enjoyed it. I could finish an entire book in a single day and still want more. But everything changed in high school. Like, my brain just stopped working. I wasn't thinking anymore. I was just scanning. Eventually, I started wondering what happened. I lost interest in the very thing that brought me so much joy. Reading wasn't my own choice anymore. It was just an assignment. And every book came with a deadline, and every page came with the pressure to get it right. Instead of losing myself in stories or ideas, I was just skimming through the pages and just memorizing, simply forcing my way through. And the more I pushed myself, the less I actually remembered. Really, I could finish an entire book and still feel like nothing stayed with me. It was as if the story just slipped through my fingers and left me with nothing but frustration. And that's when I realized it wasn't the books that were the problem. It was the pressure. All of the joy of reading disappeared when it became something I was supposed to do. That sense of duty, sense of obligation, doesn't just disappear when we became adults. You see, we come home from work, we eat dinner, we maybe clean up a little, and then mindlessly we're reaching for our phones and we're starting scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And before we know it, it's late and it's time for bed. And there it is, the book on our desk, still unfinished, maybe never even opened. It's just, sitting there and quietly making us feel guilty. Because wasn't this the thing we promised ourselves to do in our free time? And that's when reading stops feeling like a pleasure or an adventure. It starts feeling like just another item on our to-do list. And let's be honest, once our book is on the same list as cleaning the bathroom, it's hard to feel excited about it. So how do you get rid of that pressure? First of all, and I say this with love, stop scheduling your reading time. Seriously. If you're anything like me, you'll read at 7 p.m. somewhere in your journal or in your phone, and then somehow end up doom scrolling on TikTok until midnight. We know how that story ends. What you need instead is waking up your curiosity, because the guilt, the pressure, or the sense of duty will never make you a better reader. Instead of looking at that poor book on your desk with guilt in your heart, try asking yourself, what might be hiding in this book? What secrets does it have? Why is it worth reading? What will I know? Or Who will I become once I finish that book? I think that curiosity is like, I don't know, sneaking a peek into someone else's private journal. You're not reading because you have to. You're reading because you need to know, you know? You're reading because you can't help yourself. Pause this video for a second and ask yourself, when was the last time a book truly changed my mind? And you know, not just entertain you for a weekend, but actually left a mark on the way I see the world. Once you shift this sentence, I need to read this, to I wonder what's inside, reading transforms and becomes an adventure again. And adventures don't live in those time slots from 7 to 7:30. They sneak up on you. They pull you in and stay with you long after you've closed the book. Another tip I'd give you is romanticize your reading process. Reading shouldn't feel like a new chore. You know, it's not do the dishes, fold the laundry, clean the bathroom. No, I think reading deserves better than that. So, build a little ritual around it. You know, sit in some cozy corner, maybe make yourself a cup of tea, and play some music in the background, maybe classical music, and trust me, reading with classical music, it just hits different. But here's the thing, it isn't just about the aesthetic, it's about creating a space for yourself when reading feels magical again. You know, I think we're rarely having those moments now that we just can sit down and relax and do something we actually enjoy. So, romanticize your process where reading feels moving, curious, even sacred, instead of just productive. That feeling doesn't come from discipline. It comes from the atmosphere and letting yourself fall into the world of the book you're reading. And you know, it happens when you don't need to look at the clock every 5 minutes. So, no pressure, no guilt, and no productivity checklist. Just, I think, curiosity and the joy of discovering something new. Also, you don't need to finish every book you start, or, I don't know, read a whole book at once. Seriously. If a book is boring you to death, just let it go. Because not every book has to be read cover to cover to have value. Sometimes just a single chapter is enough to shift your perspective. So, suppose you've wakened up your curiosity, you're sitting with a cup of tea or coffee at your cozy corner, maybe with a blanket and a classical music playing. But how do you actually remember what you just read? How do you think while reading? I call this a philosophical reading. And it's a slow reading, intentional reading, sometimes maybe even wandering reading. And why I call this a philosophical reading? Because that's the way you have to approach philosophy. You don't just skim through the pages like you're reading a blog post. You sit with words and you let them breathe. And especially when I'm reading philosophy, I'll sometimes read the same paragraph, maybe 5 times. Other times, I stop after just 3 pages. And that's not because I'm bored, but that's because I'm thinking and I'm processing. Other times, I will ask myself a question regarding what I just read. And you see, it's about not focusing only on reading and consuming a whole book at once, but making these pauses. It's almost like you have a conversation with the author. It's like a dialogue with these ideas, sentences, words that were written recently, 100 or even 2000 years ago. Books are what makes the author immortal, and they allow you to travel back in time, to grasp those ideas that emerged in the author's head. And when you shift your mindset to that sort of reading, it becomes a process of thinking, and not just another task to do. You're not just ticking off another title and putting it back on the shelf. Because reading is a meeting of minds, someone else's and your own. And you can do this with any book, honestly. Especially classics, which are packed with ideas that are waiting to be unraveled. But don't get me wrong, it doesn't have to be a serious book to mean something. Even a young adult novel or quiet slice of life story can touch you, if you give yourself permission to slow down. You're not focusing on just a passive consumption, but on an active dialogue. And when you read, the author isn't hovering over you with a red pen, checking if you got everything right. They're offering you a thought, and that thought can be sometimes vague, sometimes contradictory, and sometimes even uncomfortable. But what's the most important is what you do with it. It's up to you. Whether you reject it, expand it, challenge it, or maybe claim it as your own. Every "I don't agree with that," and every "that's interesting." That's what brings a book to life. Not just on the page, but inside your own mind. It helps to treat reading like a meeting with someone who thinks totally differently from you. Sometimes that means arguing in your head, pausing on a single sentence, or maybe scribbling down your thoughts on the margin. And you're not supposed to agree with everything. In fact, the most valuable part of the reading often lies in resistance, in asking, is that really true? Or do I believe that too? So instead of reading just for the sake of reading, try reading for yourself. Out of curiosity or out of desire to understand, out of the longing to feel something more than just your eyes scanning through the page. And don't be afraid to pause, to think, to feel, to argue, or maybe to jot down a thought, not to be productive, but for yourself, to see more clearly. And that's how you remember what matters to you. Thank you so much for watching and letting me share this with you. I'm really curious, what's your relationship with reading these days? Do you find it easy to focus? Do books still move you? Or, as I've said, have they become just another item on the to-do list? So let me know in the comments, because I love to hear your thoughts. And if this video made you reflect or change something in you, or put some spark inside of you, that's awesome, and I'm glad to hear it. So until next time, read slowly, think deeply, and take care.